Good day, everyone. We're almost coming to an end of our LRVS, but I think it's quite good for this particular topic that I'm going to moderate. It's all about um, sustainability, sustainable infrastructure, assets management, partnering with our original custodian of our land. This will be presented by Bhuiyan, who is the owner and managing director of Infrastructure Management Solutions. She is very passionate about helping our indigenous people and will be speaking to us about this particular topic. Um, Again, we just like to highlight that if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat, and then we will address it later at the end of the presentation. I will also be running a poll at the middle of the session, so if you can give your single answer, that would be great. So, having said that one, let us start and begin.
Good afternoon from Australia. I'm Bhuiyan. I am the owner and managing director of Infrastructure Management Solutions. My background is civil engineering and I specialize in infrastructure and asset management. Today, I'll be discussing the principle of sustainable infrastructure and asset management through the respectful partnership of the original custodians of the lands on which we are all tuning in from. I'd like to begin this session with an acknowledgement to country. This is something special we do here in Australia. It's a way for us to demonstrate respect for our traditional custodians. I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are all meeting today, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, and other Indigenous people that are tuning in today. NAIDOC Week is an annual celebration in Australia that honours the culture, history, and achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The 2023 NAIDOC theme is For Our Elders. This is a program that brings all the focus back on our original custodians in spirit of reconciliation. Indigenous communities in Australia and throughout Asia Pacific have traditionally played a crucial role in the sustainable management and conservation of land and assets. Recognising their custodian fosters the understanding that Indigenous knowledge and practices can contribute to sustainable environmental stewardship, infrastructure and asset management. By embracing collaboration with Indigenous elders, asset management practices can become more inclusive, effective, and sustainable. This approach acknowledges the interconnectedness of the land, infrastructure, and communities, ultimately leading to better outcomes for both the infrastructure and the well-being of our Indigenous peoples and their ancestral lands. So today I will start off with introducing what is the principles behind sustainable infrastructure and asset management, the role of Indigenous communities within the sphere of infrastructure and asset management, how Indigenous knowledge and contributions have helped shape this principle already within the Asia Pacific region. I'll discuss a case study that was implemented throughout my work. I'll give some preventative maintenance ideas in the mining sector, honing in on bridges because I'm a civil engineer, so that's what I specialize in. I'll also give some decarbonisation in mining ideas, honing in again on bridges, and then I'll give some final notes and wrap up points. Sustainable infrastructure and asset management refers to the application of environmentally conscious and socially responsible practices throughout the life cycle of infrastructure assets. It involves integrating sustainable principles into the planning, design, construction, operation, maintenance, and disposal of said asset to minimize environmental impacts, optimize resource and promote long-term asset performance. In Australia, sustainable infrastructure and asset management aligns with climate change commitments and net zero carbon targets. It also contributes to the broader sustainability objectives like greenhouse gas reduction, resource conservation, and social equity. It further promotes collaboration among asset owners, operators, government agency, industry stakeholders. And it also hones in on local communities that drives long-term environmental, economic, and social benefits. Some of the benefits of implementing sustainable infrastructure management include improved environmental performance by minimizing environmental impacts and reducing carbon emissions and waste generations. It also highlights the need for optimized resource utilization, energy efficiency, and proactive maintenance strategies that focuses on minimizing asset lifecycle cost. Sustainable asset management enhances performance, reduces downtime, disruptions, and associated cost. Furthermore, it improves stakeholder relations by demonstrating environmental stewardship and social responsibility, fosters stakeholder satisfaction, trust, and community support. Finally, sustainable asset management strategies such as proactive maintenance, condition monitoring, and risk assessment help identify and address potential issues early on, leading to an enhanced asset longevity. Indigenous communities throughout APAC possess valuable traditional knowledge and perspective on land management, biodiversity conservation, and sustainable practices. Indigenous communities have a deep understanding of local ecosystems and environmental constraints, enabling the integration of traditional ecological knowledge into sustainable infrastructure and asset management practices, which can inform and improve infrastructure and asset management strategies. Traditional knowledge considers the interconnectedness of natural and cultural systems, providing holistic perspective that enhance infrastructure resilience, adaptive capacity, and long-term sustainability. Incorporating Indigenous perspectives fosters more informed, inclusive, and context-specific decision-making, leading to better outcomes for all. In Australia, there are over 500 different Indigenous groups, each with their own distinct cultural traditions, values, and knowledge system. And within Asia Pacific, we home a diverse range of Indigenous communities, including but not limited to the Maoris in New Zealand and various tribal groups in Southeast Asia, and so on. Indigenous communities in the Asia-Pacific region have made significant scientific contributions to natural and non-natural asset management, drawing on their traditional knowledge and practices. In natural asset management, Indigenous communities possess a wealth of knowledge on sustainable land and resource management, including techniques for regenerative agricultural, forest management, water conservation, and biodiversity protection. In non-natural asset management, Indigenous communities bring unique perspectives on infrastructure development and management that emphasizes the harmony with nature, community well-being, and long-term sustainability. This includes traditional approaches to construction and maintaining infrastructure, such as building materials, location selection based on environmental factors, and incorporating cultural and spiritual considerations. The Indigenous communities in Asia Pacific region possesses valuable scientific knowledge and perspectives that contribute to the natural and non-natural asset management. Recognizing and incorporating their contribution is essential for promoting sustainable practices, preserving cultural heritage, and fostering inclusive and equitable approaches to infrastructure development and management. Sustainable infrastructure and asset management. Adopting sustainable practices ensures that infrastructure development and management prioritizes environmental stewardship, social equity, and long-term sustainability, as mentioned before. Some key examples of where this principle has worked include Indigenous community-based micro-hydro programs in the Philippines. This initiative provides a renewable energy solution and economic opportunities for Indigenous community in remote regions. And remote housing upgrades in Australia, collaborative initiative between Indigenous communities, government and agencies, and non-for-profit organisation have led to the upgrading of remote housing, improving living conditions and access to essential services. I encourage everyone to Google these topics. They're very inspiring to read. Indigenous communities and traditional owners maintain a profound and enduring connection to the land, sky, and sea. This strong connection often leads them to choose to reside in remote areas, away from urbanized cities and the artificial aspects of modern life. And usually with remote communities, what happens is there is a lack of critical infrastructure that has significant implications for their health, well-being, and quality of life for the Indigenous community members. Limited access to infrastructure hinders economic development and opportunities for Indigenous communities, perpetuating a socio-economic disparity. Historical legacies of colonization have resulted in the marginalization and exclusion of Indigenous communities, particularly in remote regions. Finally, rapid industrialization and consumer-driven economies and anti-environmental practices have further exacerbated the limited access to critical infrastructure in these regions. I will now focus on the importance of engaging with traditional owners during the asset lifecycle and benefits of incorporating traditional knowledge into infrastructure and asset management strategies. The information about engaging with Indigenous leaders in different phases of the ISO 55000 Standards for Asset Management framework aligns well within this topic, as it highlights the specific points at which asset managers can involve Indigenous leaders in their decision-making process. For example, in the strategic planning phase, we should engage with Indigenous leaders to understand their cultural values, aspiration, and priorities related to infrastructure and asset management. Incorporating Indigenous perspectives into strategic planning process ensures alignment with cultural heritage preservation, sustainability goals, and remote community development. In the asset identification and asset management phase, we could collaborate with Indigenous leaders to identify assets of cultural significance, including sites of cultural heritage or ecological importance. And this one's my favorite. Risk management phase, involving Indigenous leaders in risk assessment activities as they possess unique insights into natural and cultural risks specific to the land and surrounding areas. Integrating Indigenous knowledge of environmental changes, seasonal patterns, and potential impacts on assets to enhance risk management strategies for said infrastructure. Within the decision and optimization phase, we could seek to input and ask for their guidance when making decisions related to asset optimization, maintenance, and renewals. Considering Indigenous perspectives on sustainable practices includes traditional land management techniques to optimize asset performance and longevity. Performance and evaluation phase. In this phase, we can engage Indigenous leaders in evaluating asset performance and assessing the effectiveness of asset management strategies. We can ask them for some feedback on the social, cultural, and environmental impacts of asset management practices on the Indigenous communities and their land, again, specifically in the remote areas. Recently, through my business, I have created a comprehensive standard for asset management within the company, aligning it with the internationally recognized ISO 55000, which is the standards for asset management. In this contract, I developed the standard by incorporating the principles and requirements outlined in the ISO 55000 standards, while also integrating the specific considerations and best practices related to Indigenous engagement and sustainable asset management. I ensured that the standard encompassed all relevant aspects of asset management, including planning, acquisition, operation, maintenance, and disposal. Incorporated specific provisions within the standard to emphasize the importance of Indigenous engagement throughout the asset management lifecycle. I also integrated principles of sustainability, cultural preservation, and social responsibility into the standard, aligning it with the broader organizational goals and objectives. Indigenous people can play a crucial role in identifying and leading efforts to mitigate various deterioration factors in a mine. Some of the deterioration factors that Indigenous people can address and lead include environmental impacts. Indigenous communities possess valuable insights into local ecosystems, biodiversity, and sustainable land and water management practices. Cultural heritage preservation. Indigenous people can lead efforts to identify, protect, and preserve culturally significant sites and artifacts within a mining area. Their deep connection to the land and cultural heritage allows them to provide valuable guidance on how to minimize impacts on sacred sites and cultural landscapes. Indigenous communities can take a leading role in addressing health and well-being concerns associated with mining activities. They can advocate for implementation of measures to mitigate air and water pollution, ensure access to clean water, and minimize community health risk. And the mining sector should probably be open to their empowering suggestions. Indigenous people can lead initiatives to ensure the fair distribution of benefits from mining activities within their communities. This can involve negotiating agreements that provide employment opportunities, training, capacity building, and economic development programs that support sustainable livelihoods. Indigenous communities can contribute to their traditional knowledge and land management practices to guide mine rehabilitation and restoration efforts. They can provide insights into regenerative land use practices, reforestation techniques, and restoration of native flora and fauna habitats. Indigenous people can advocate for the implementation of sustainable mining practices that consider long-term social, environmental, and economic impacts. They can encourage the adoption of responsible mining techniques, resource conservation, and promotion of renewable energy sources. Mines are often located in remote regions in Australia. They are built on Indigenous sacred lands, and this isn't just in Australia, that's throughout the world, and Asia Pacific is no different. And so, therefore, mines tend to have limited access to transport infrastructure. Bridges play a crucial role in mining operations, with my experience being in Australia. So in Australia, bridges play a crucial role in mining operations, providing access across various terrains and water bodies, ensuring preventative maintenance for bridges in mines and engaging Indigenous communities in Australia's traditional lands require a comprehensive approach that respects cultural values and promotes collaboration. This can look something like implementing measures to minimize environmental impacts during bridge maintenance, collaboration with Indigenous communities to identify and mitigate potential risks to water bodies, ecosystems, and cultural heritage sites. We can work with Indigenous communities to establish a comprehensive monitoring and maintenance plans for bridges and mines, where we can engage Indigenous communities in the monitoring process, such as involving local experts or community members in the inspections to ensure ongoing safety and maintenance. Preventative maintenance can help identify potential issues early on, allowing for timely intervention and reducing the risk of major failures or safety hazards, which can lead to untimely disposal of infrastructure, adding to the global waste. And particularly in rural and remote communities where resource is scarce, even though I'm talking about a resource sector, it is sometimes easier to apply maintenance techniques than a full-blown renewal of an asset. And finally, ensuring decarbonisation for bridge maintenance and management in the mining sector, which are generally located within a remote Indigenous community, require comprehensive and collaborative approach. Here are some key considerations. Indigenous communities possess valuable traditional ecological knowledge about local environment, therefore engaging in Indigenous communities throughout all decision-making stages of asset management to ensure their perspectives, knowledge, and priorities are taken into account. We can also rely on their specialization of ecology and environmental practices and land management to help us engineers to opt for more sustainable materials and construction techniques that will hopefully lower our carbon emissions associated with bridge lifecycle management. Finally, from my experience, I have gathered that the mining sector is ideally positioned to provide training and research opportunities for traditional owners and the wider Indigenous community to contribute to decarbonisation efforts throughout the bridge lifecycle management. So thank you all for being here today. I hope I shed some important light on this incredibly important topic of reconciliation through engagement within sustainable engineering practices. I hope you all take this presentation back with you and have some time to process this information and think about how we can all implement inclusion of Indigenous knowledge and science techniques within our engineering operations and principles and practices. Thank you very much.
By Ish, unfortunately,
So, hi, Zuru.
yep.
Ish could not join us today. She's having some issues with joining at this point in time, but she sends her regards, and I know um I've gone through her presentation with her, and she's very passionate about the Indigenous people, as you all could tell from
Yeah.
her presentation. It's very, very interesting. And I know Rafe asked a question about how would you distinguish between Indigenous communities informing asset management strategy versus the standard community consultation? That's a very interesting question, Rafe. And we actually had a little bit of a discussion about that, Isha and I, earlier. So I'm not gonna be as good as her in terms of answering, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try my Trini version of this. Um, what One of the differences that she spoke about is that yes, you have communities and they can consult, but when you have Indigenous communities, they also have, I want to say, more than thousands of years of experience in building these things. And I'm just talking about it from a building perspective because I think in her presentation she spoke a bit about that in terms of from the civil engineering background. So there are certain things that indigenous people are more connected to. They're more connected to the land. They're more connected to, everything else compared to just having your regular communities. So I hope that makes some sense. I can't deliver it as good as Ish,
Yeah,
but
I
this
think
is my version of.
yeah, then maybe to add that one, Sanya,
Yes.
meaning recently I was also took my oath, and now I'm currently an Australian citizen as well. So
Yay.
most of the time when you are going to big companies, they always give respect to
Mhm.
the indigenous people. I think it's kind of funny that people aren't very knowledgeable on technologies and such, but when you look into the indigenous people, they have seems like they have more connection to the earth or the world itself, and that's where we need to communicate with these indigenous people so that their heritage or their long history of having connection with this earth is not being cut off by our improvement of the land. I think that's where by involving these people or indigenous people, we'll be able to have more respect and the less impact that we'll be able to contribute into the surrounding. So it's always been the sustainability of the land, and not only the sustainability of the land, but also the sustainability of the culture itself. I think that's the important thing by involving them.
Oh, yes, definitely. Ish would be
Yeah.
so proud of you.
Yeah. So I think it was a good thing. I learned a lot, especially on this session. I never considered taking them into an account when you're building things. So
Yes.
I think, yeah, I think it's an eye opener for me,
Mhm.
especially on this particular topic. It's a good. I'm very blessed that I'm able to moderate this session,
Yes.
and most likely I'll have more chat with Ish once
Yes,
I go.
definitely.
Yeah, so that's good. That's good. I think if there's, I did run the poll, maybe
Mhm.
just to share to people the results.
Okay.
It's showing that yeah, some 50% of people has in this question, which is, are you aware of impact indigenous people can make on our asset management? 50% of people has answered no, I didn't think about that,
Ah,
and 50% also answered, where do I sign up to learn more?
yes.
So
Where do you sign
yeah,
up? You sign up by contacting Ish.
yeah,
Um,
correct. So it's like people. It's like a really an eye opener that they need to know that they need to involve the people of the land on this particular sustainability or improvement of the land. So that's great. I think having said that one, considering Ish is not around,
yes,
that will end the session a
definitely.
bit earlier, 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do guys have any other question for Ish, do send it to us so that we'll be able to
Please.
communicate with her.
And follow up with her. She's always willing to have a conversation about
Yeah.
how we can change things and start making those wheels of progress starting to move. So
Yes.
definitely contact her and feel free to reach out to her. I'm
Yep.
sorry she
That's
can't
great.
miss it that this
Yeah.
session.
It's all good. Again, thank you guys for joining in this session, and I'll be ending it
Yes.
now. See
Bye.
ya.